friends. So Portage is very close to us. My mom immigrated here from England when she was 8. My dad grew up in Poplar Point, and he played for the Portage Terriers when they won the Centennial Cup back in 1974. So Larry Dewis will remember that as well. So thank you so much for having me today. So with that, we're going to get on with the show now that I've said my pleasantries right now. And this statement right here, you must do the things you think you cannot do. Jennifer was asked what she would tell her 16-year-old self, and I think that's what I would tell my 16-year-old self. In 2003, I walked through the doors of CKX Television in Brandon to start my career as a sports broadcaster. At that time, the idea of calling an NHL game, it didn't exist in my mind. It didn't exist in my career path. It didn't exist in any woman's career path because it didn't exist because it had never happened. Fast forward, and that same thing cannot be said. On March 8th, this past Sunday on International Women's Day, I think this picture speaks 1,000 words. Along with 3-time Olympian Cassie Campbell-Pascal, I joined her in the booth, and I became the first woman to call a game in the National Hockey League in the play-by-play role on national television for Sportsnet. Yeah. I'm pretty damn proud of that too, I gotta say. But the fact of the matter is that to this historic moment, there were very many hurdles. And let's start right here. June 21st, 2016, I'm never gonna forget that date for as long as I lived. Because the same company that I just made history with, they called me that day on the phone to tell me that my services with their company were no longer needed and that I was going to be laid off. I had been working for 13 years when I received a job at Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada after they signed a historic deal, 12 years, $5.2 billion, to be the national rights holder here in Canada for the NHL, the home of hockey. In 2003, as I mentioned, when I walked through the door at CKX, my dream wasn't to be a play-by-play announcer. My dream was to work for Hockey Night in Canada. And when they hired me in 2014, that dream came true. As far as I was concerned, I had made it. And here it was 2 years later, and I was being told I wasn't needed over the phone. It's very interesting when you have to thank someone for all they've done and giving you an opportunity when they are absolutely blowing up your world. How do you do that? You have to remember it's not personal, it's business. And the way I handled myself in that very moment by thanking them at that time was probably the most important thing I've done in my career. But things got worse before they got better. In fact, they got much worse. You know, it took me 13 years to earn my way to a national network from starting in Brandon. And for me, that meant sacrifice. I've always loved my career. I've been a career-first type of woman, and I have no regrets about that. But the sacrifice, as many women find, that if you're going to succeed in your career, something else is going to fall by the wayside. The idea of having it all does not exist. It is a term that as women we need to get rid of. It was created by men to sell deodorant in an advertising commercial back in the 80s, and they can all go screw themselves because they have no idea what it means. Now, that being said, the fact of the matter was sacrifice to me because I was focused on my career and I was all right with not having a family, but it did mean time away from my family and friends. It meant missing weddings and birthdays and holidays. It meant immigrating to a different country for a job in which I couldn't come back to Canada for a year and I didn't get to see my father for nearly 12 months. That's what sacrifice meant to me. But it's what you had to do in my business and in so many business to climb the ladder of success. You had to make your career the priority. And I don't regret that. But what I found that after I was laid off and I was looking for a new position in my industry, my success was hurting me more than it was helping me. My agent kept getting the same answer from companies when I was going out for jobs. She's fantastic, she's great, she's qualified, she's experienced, but we're going in a different direction. And that direction, because my industry was in trouble, was ultimately less experienced for less money. And we see that across the board in every industry nowadays. But then something happened. I was back in Brandon living with my mother, Liz, at 37 years of age. I had given up my place in Toronto because I didn't have a job. I was doing what I should do fiscally. I was doing what I should do as a smart woman. But when you're 38 living at your mother's on unemployment, you kind of realize that's not that sexy. Let's just put it that way. I couldn't get a job. The hockey season was getting ready to start, and then in the 11th hour, Fox Sports called my agent. The Anaheim Ducks needed a rinkside reporter. Wasn't exactly the job I wanted to walk into, but you do what you need to do in those moments, and I was thrilled with the opportunity. They said, we don't want to audition her, we know her work, we want to hire her. I was talking to HR, I had started my immigration papers for my visa. I was looking at places online where to live in Anaheim because we were 2 weeks out from the season and I knew it was going to be a tight turnaround. All this was going on. And then 2 days before the puck was about to drop on the NHL season, my agent called. And he said, Leah, guess what? They're going in a different direction. That direction was not having that position at all because they decided they couldn't afford it. That's how much trouble my industry was in. But what I realized in that moment is I was in trouble. There were no opportunities. This hockey season was starting, and I didn't have a job. As I mentioned, I was staying with my mom, so I walked into the bedroom that I was staying in, and I closed the door, and I just leaned back against that door, and I sunk down to the floor. And then it started. Just waves and waves of tears. And that little voice that was inside of me that had been so strong, telling me, you know what, Leah, you're going to be okay. You're going to get a job. You've worked too hard, kept saying to me, Leah, get off the floor. Stop crying and get off the floor. But the tears kept coming. Stop crying, Leah. Get off the floor. But I couldn't. It was because I had this huge weight on my shoulders, this weight that I couldn't push off. And it was the thing that I feared the most in the world. I had failed. I had done all of this, and I had failed. I couldn't get a job. But as they say, tomorrow is another day. And on that day, I decided to do something that I hate doing more than anything in the world. I asked for help. Right? I always used to think that asking for help was a sign of weakness in my career. And I think that often comes from being in a male-dominated career. You don't want to look like you don't know or that you need somebody to do something for you because you're proving it on your own. But what I realize now is that asking for help is the ultimate power move. Because by reaching out to this network that I had cultivated over 13 years of being a solid professional in my industry, they were willing to go out and speak on my behalf, to promote me, to say, you should hire her, you should give this young woman an opportunity. Notice how I put young in there. And what I realized was that that was me demonstrating my influence as a professional, my power over them, that I had all of these names in the business, top executives, people that I respect and admire that were willing to go out and speak on my behalf. But the thing was, when they came to me and said, of course we'll help you, Leah, what do you need? I didn't have an answer for that. If I'm not a sports broadcaster, then who am I? I mean, seriously, do I have any other skills than talking sports? Well, of course I do. One of the things I find is that we often get defined by the title of our job or what we do on a daily basis, and we limit ourselves. Jennifer spoke about how thrilling it was the day that she decided to walk across the street and sign up for classes. Because we can't limit what we do, because we all have transferable skills. And I had those skills, I just didn't realize it. And we become victims of what we do, and we have to understand that when we look at the skills that we have, they can lead to different opportunities. Because all my years of doing this, hi Sid, how are you? Any cute? Yeah, I'm going to say it. They talk about us all the time, so I may as well. Well, all the years of doing that, well, this is where it led me. This is not where I thought it would lead me. To the steps of the Manitoba Legislative Building. Once again, using that power move. Asking for help, utilizing my network. A member of my network for many years, because of my sports involvement, was the Premier of Manitoba, the Honorable Brian Pallister. And you know what? All of my years of presenting, writing, content creation, organization, branding, and most of all, presenting when it matters most, when that little red light goes on, and being able to handle any situation that's thrown at me in a pinch, those had worth. And I went into that building, I recognized some needs that they needed in their communications department, and lo and behold, they looked at my skill set and it had worth to them, and they hired me. I'm a part of the executive council for the Premier of Manitoba. I handle his events and his multimedia, and that is now my job. And in that job, I have learned how government works. I never thought I would be in politics. I have this entirely new set of skills. I'm a director of department. I manage people. I've hired 4 women who work for me. I call us the Babs, the badass bitches. And, you know, I look at all of that, and this is not where I ever thought I would be, but when I look at my resume, it is so much better, and I'm so much more proud of it than I was when I just had my broadcasting on it, because I have utilized all of the skills that I cultivated as a broadcaster and transferred them into this job where I am now creating new skills which are going to continue to benefit me no matter what ends up happening into my life. And that is the important part. But more important than that is that this all happened because I asked for my opportunity. And here's the thing. Don't wait for your opportunity. You need to ask for it. You need to create it. And with this new confidence of asking for my opportunity, I did turn back around and look at my first love, and that is broadcasting. The thing is that I remembered that no one was hiring me, and there weren't a lot of jobs in my position as a host or a ringside reporter that were available, and I knew that I was going to have to reinvent myself in order to stay in the game. When I thought about what's the one thing that you still want to do if you can get back into broadcasting, the one thing I hadn't done that I would regret if I walked away was I'd never covered an Olympics. But the fact of the matter is the Olympics, only 2 networks in North America have them, CBC and NBC. They have their pick of the litter and they have a ton of staff, and it's a very hard assignment to get. But you know what you don't hear? Is women calling women's hockey. And that's what entered my brain. And at this time in 2017, I thought to myself, why the hell not? Are women not calling women's sports? And that's what made me decide to go into play-by-play. The thing is that I didn't know another single female who was calling play-by-play because there were none. So I needed someone to guide me through this. And I'm a very big believer in mentors. And when I pick a mentor, I pick him well. And this is Doc Emmerich. Mike Doc Emmerich is a Hall of Fame broadcaster for NBC Sports. He has done it all. He is the greatest voice in the game, and he is my mentor. And he became my mentor because once again, I went back to that network. I found someone to introduce us. He took the phone call, and that's who I spoke to about calling play-by-play. The very first discussion I ever had was with Doc Emmerich about it. And by the end of that phone call, he said, Leah, I can tell by the way you talk, I can tell by your resume, I can tell that you can do this. And he gave me the advice that this is what you need to do. Exactly what I did back 70 years ago when I first started. That's a little bit of an emphasis on that. He's not quite that old. But he told me to get into a rink wherever I could and just start calling. Just start calling out loud to yourself, record it, and see how it goes. Well, when Doc Emmerich tells you to do something, you do it. And with that, I decided to walk to Manitoba Moose games, sit in the crowd, and I was the crazy lady sitting in the crowd at the hockey game talking out loud to herself. And I didn't even have a beer with me, so I couldn't even, say that that was at fault for it. But that's exactly what I did. And so I did it. And I was absolutely horrible. I can't tell you how horrible I was. But the fact of the matter is that I was doing it, and I thought to myself, why not? Why not see if anyone